Sometimes you just want a standalone book and not something that is part of a bigger series. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing my recent favorite fantasy standalones with you. So hello my fellow fantasy book lovers and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy, I'm a goth girl from Belgium who loves to read fantasy books. I personally really love a good standalone book, a book that you can start reading and whenever you're finished, the story is done, it is concluded, and you're not left waiting for more. And I feel that is what a good standalone book does. And with this also comes that not everyone wants to read series. Some people just want something quick and fast and easy. That of course doesn't take away that I do love series as well, duologies, trilogies and more. But for today's video, I want to focus on standalone books. The first one, I just simply want to mention it and get it out of my way, is Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. This is the book that inspired me to start this channel, one of the books that got me into fantasy reading. It is about a parallel world to London and our main character is kind of dragged into it whilst he's striving to save someone. So if you're curious about this book, go ahead and read it. I think it is well worth it. Up next, we have an author that has started writing mostly standalone books, and it is T. Kingfisher. Now, T. Kingfisher is actually known under another name, Ursula something, as a children book author, if I'm not mistaken, and they also write other books, of course. Now, my two personal favorites that I've recently read were Thorn Edge. Thorn Edge is like the shortest book that I've read in a very long time, and in Thorn Edge, the story is actually concluded in 119 pages, so it is extremely thin. I have read this book in an evening. I think if you read an hour or two, this will be done. And this is actually a retelling about Sleeping Beauty. It's kind of a twisted take on it. What if the princess in the tower was actually locked up for a different reason and maybe isn't a princess at all? So I really love this dark and twisted version of a fairy tale, or like inspired by a fairy tale, but then a different approach to it. The second book by T. Kingfisher that I really want to recommend is Nettle and Bone. In Nettle and Bone, we follow the third daughter of like these people that are governing over a piece of land, and they have an alliance with a prince, and they actually have sent one of their daughters to marry him. She passed away, unfortunately, during her pregnancy, and then they actually sent their second daughter to him as well. And the third daughter, to avoid her getting married to him as well, they actually sent her away to go with the nuns, to live there and to like be educated there. But when Mara finds out that the prince is actually not treating her sister well at all, she goes to a grave witch to try and find a solution to get rid of the prince. And that is the story that we follow. Now, the beginning of the book jumps a little bit. So we start somewhere in the middle of the story and then we jump back to the beginning to then jump back to where we were. Nettle and Bone is not particularly a light read. It has a lot more serious themes going on in the book. And sometimes there's also things that I'm like, the decisions that they make, and it's a little bit darker. And yeah, if you like darker fairy tale type stories, then I think you might enjoy this as well. Up next, we have When Among Crows. And this book I only read very recently. It's again very short. It's only 170 pages. So even if you read slow, you might be able to finish this in a few days. I really enjoyed this book because it has a different take on mythology. So the mythology of this book is Polish, if I'm not mistaken. And the main character is actually a sort of monster killer. They have a sword that is put into their bodies and attached to their spine or something. It was kind of dark and twisted, but actually really cool. So for how short this book was, I really enjoyed it. It told the story as a whole. I didn't feel like there were elements missing. Things were also not dragged out unnecessarily. I feel, especially with combat scenes lately in some books that I've read, they drag out the combat scenes to be multiple chapters, and I really don't like that. It's really unnecessary to me personally. So in this book, we follow the main character, Dimitri. He's actually a monster killer who's trying to find a specific plant, and with that plant, he wants to save someone. You get all of the explanations in the little blurb that is here at the front of the book, and you immediately know what this will be about. So if you want a fantasy book that is a fast and easy read, this is good for you. The next book is technically not a standalone or a novella, but could be read as such. And it is Six Scorched Roses. In Six Scorched Roses, we follow our main character Lilith, who lives in a village that is cursed, so everyone in the village gets ill. And she's trying to find or make a cure for the illness, and for that she wants to use vampire blood to experiment with. And that's how she encounters Vale, the vampire living not so far from her village. She goes to him with an offer to exchange 6 roses for 6 vials of blood. That is the basic premises of this book, and this book is just short of 200 pages, so for me it was an evening read, so I started it and I finished it the same evening, and I really enjoyed it. This has vampires, of course, and if after reading this novella you feel like you want more from this world, then you can of course get into Serpent and the Wings of Night, into Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, and into the other books of the Crowns of Nyaxia realm that Carissa Broadbent is setting. But I feel like this book as a standalone was very well as well, and I feel like you could just read it as is. And then for something completely different. My Roommate is a Vampire. This is of course a romantasy book. This has a very high focus on the romance. I could also put Bride right next to it. They are both lighter romantasy reads, so they have a fantasy setting, but the main plotline is of course the romance plotline. In My Roommate is a Vampire, we have the setting of this really ancient rich vampire who owns an apartment, who's looking for someone to come live with him in the apartment because it's too big and he needs to make some sort of money. And then we have this very poor girl who's trying to look for an apartment, sees the advert, replies to it, and actually gets the apartment, which is set way too cheap, by the way, for prices nowadays, but he doesn't know that at the beginning of the story. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. There is a big age gap between the vampire and the girl, and they of course get involved. I mean, that's what this book is about. And then there is Bride by Ailey Hazelwood, of which I don't own a physical copy. I bought it digitally. Maybe someday I will get one, but it's not on my priority list. And Bride is actually set into our world, but except for humans, there's also vampires and werewolves living in the world. And there has been an alliance going on between humans and vampires for a longer time, and one of the vampire children goes live with the humans and vice versa, and we follow the main character. She's called Misery. She is actually a vampire child that has been raised by the humans, kind of, and she actually decided to stay there until she's called back to her father and to her clan, but this time to act as collateral between vampires and werewolves. So she actually has to marry the alpha male werewolf from the local clan to like have this alliance between their clans. Of course, there is a romance plotline between the two of them. You don't really know at first how or what. There is a big knotting kink going on in this book. Look it up before you read it. If it's something that you really don't want to read about, then don't read this book. I found it very enjoyable. And again, if you're looking for a fun romantasy book, then this is perfect. As far as I'm aware, they don't have any follow-up books. And if you want more romantasy standalones, there's also Sarah Hawley. Technically, it's not standalones, but I feel like you could read A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, A Demon's Guide to Wooing a Witch, and hopefully very soon A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire. They are standalone, as in you follow 2 different main characters in each book, but they are taking place in the same village. So the people from book 1 come back into book 2, etc., but they're not the same main characters. So technically, it doesn't count as a standalone, but I still wanted to quickly mention them. Up next, we have Scarlet ST Clair's fairy tale retellings, Mountains Made of Glass. There is a second book in this series as a whole coming out very soon. It is Apples Dipped in Gold, but they are part of the same series, but they're all standalone books. So it's a story from start to finish in one small-ish book. In Mountains Made of Glass, we follow a girl who lives in a village, and there's curses on the village, and for each curse they pick someone to try and solve that curse. When there is a frog in the local well, they decide that the main girl of the story needs to go and remove the frog from the well. She accidentally kills the frog, and then she triggers the Fae Princess to actually come for her, and she needs to live with one of these Fae Princes to be able to get free again, and she has to solve a riddle for him. So find out his true name to actually be able to be set free, or she has to stay with him forever. So it's actually It's based upon multiple fairy tales, multiple different fairy tales, and the second book in this series will also be based upon them, and I really enjoy it. So if you're looking into like a dark fairy tale retelling with a lot of romance line in it, then this is for you. And the final book that I want to mention is this gorgeous edition. It is Bitterthorn by Kat Dunn. In Bitterthorn, we have a village, and every more or less 50 years, the witch that lives in the castle above the village through the forest, she comes to the village to actually ask for someone in sacrifice to her. They don't need to kill the person just needs to come with her and live with the witch. At the start of the book, we follow a young girl. She actually doesn't feel like she belongs in her family. Her mother passed away. She lives with her dad and her stepmother and stepsisters. And it has a little bit of Cinderella vibes at the beginning. So you really notice that this girl is like not fitting in. And when the witch comes, she actually volunteers to go with the witch. When she goes with the witch to the castle, she actually starts uncovering a lot of mysterious things that are going on with the witch. And she tries to find out what is actually going on. So that's what this book is about. There is a romance line a little bit in this book, not super heavily present. I really liked the mystery part of it. I think this was a very good read, hence why I want to recommend it to you. But do know that this is more a YA book than most of the others that I've recommended to you. So these were my current favorite standalone books that I've read recently. These are all fantasy books, but all a little bit different from each other. Should you have any standalone recommendations as well, feel free to let me know in a comment down below, because I think that standalone books are heavily underrated, and I also truly believe that you can tell a full story into one book. Of course, give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it, and if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and I would love to have you for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye!